And when 9/11 happened, that really like kicked off not only a political pursuit, but ultimately a spiritual interest.
What's up, everybody? Esoteric Eddie here. Namaste. Tonight, we're going to be talking with an amazing guest. He is an author, a researcher, and many other things that I'm excited to learn about tonight. It's been a crazy couple weeks for me. I've been all over the place, but I'm excited to relax for this moment and dive in with our brother here. So, what's up, man? How are you doing?
Oh, peace on earth. Thanks so much, Eddie, man. I appreciate being able to talk with you and communicate some of my ideas with your people. And I'm honored. I'm honored to be here and
Absolutely, man.
build a little bit.
Cool, cool. So let's get started by just telling the people who you are and what it is that you do.
Well, I focus on writing on topics that instigate consciousness. And a lot of my stuff, most of my stuff is nonfiction, but even the fiction that I've written is focused on really having some thought-provoking kind of material. Um, I teach Tai Chi. I grew up kind of bi-coastal in New York and California. So I'm a classic American bastard.
Yeah, where
And
where in California?
Mendocino, I went to school in Mendocino,
Awesome.
and lived in the Bay Area variously, and I now live in Tahoe.
Sweet. I'm from San Diego, but I lived in Santa Rosa for about a year.
Okay, dope. Yeah, you know the area then.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool.
Cool, man. And so you've written a few books now, right? A couple books.
Yeah, yeah. I've written like more books than I've sold, maybe. I don't know. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Yeah, I've written some teen books.
Really?
Um, yep. The most recent book I've written is The Fourth Initiation.
Okay.
And I am accused of having an obsession with four, or sometimes which I variously call the duality of polarity.
Mm.
And I've been exploring that concept in my obsession, I guess, or this, writer's craving to find new ideas. I've recently kind of found a way to inspire the self-development internally in an initiatory manner that a lot of groups will cop on to such ideas, and maybe they have good initiatory phases or whatever as well. But the real of initiation is internal.
Mm.
The real is going to be where it's consciousness driven, not necessarily artificial ritual, if you will.
Yeah.
And I kind of, at times went through the school of hard knocks, and that's like a initiatory phase of life. So sometimes one of the biggest initiation processes that is embedded into these ritualistic formats that might be institutionally controlled, if you will, is overcoming fear. And a lot of this, uh, cinematically, we might see portrayed hundreds of years ago, where they actually Luke Skywalker does it too. He goes through the cave, right? He comes out the other side. And a lot of cultures had a pattern where you would go through a cave literally, or go through a period of time, or a distance, or obtain something from a distance. And of course there was a lot to that, overcoming nature, but the main important aspect was overcoming fear.
Mm. So before we get more into the fear thing, because that's an amazing topic, and it's something that actually was brought up to me today and more
Okay,
recently.
dope.
So it's kind of serendipitous there. But where did this all start for you? When did you start getting into like the number four and this spiritual path?
I think, I partly grew up in NYC, and one of the first things I learned outside of school was esoteric, in and of itself. And a lot of things on the street were kind of, although they had like a streetwise aspect to it, they were also spiritual. And that being the one of the first things I learned out of school that I found value in was in New York. There was the NGE group, and they had this idea of the 85, 10, and 5%. And that is the 85% are the dumb, deaf, and blind that are led by the slave masters, and thus the 10% and the 5% want to free your mind, if you will, right?
Yeah.
Share the truth. And so I remember that being just a really valuable lesson, something that stuck with me. And when 9/11 happened, that really like kicked off not only a political pursuit, but ultimately a spiritual interest. I guess I've always had both those interests, but it kind of kicked off into where how both of these seemingly not necessarily parallel realms intersect. And the first book I wrote was inspired from that, and I kind of juxtapose in part using that NGE idea that there's four types of people in the world, and
Yeah.
that is the idiots, zealots, patriots, and elitists. Um, and that was kind of an intuitive, um, way to present what my non-jingoistic, non-nationalistic interpretation of what a patriot is. I found that using contrasts of other thinking, patterns would really help reveal all of what I was trying to say. And and again, that was just kind of intuitive, but as I started looking into the material, I found that there was a lot to the four specifically or broadly, but really a lot to the four archetypes of mind, even too. So it kind of started there where I just wanted to present an idea, but the political really led to the metaphysical.
So 9/11 happened and that kind of like sparked this awakening and led you to this number four and its spiritual significance.
Ultimately led me to the four. Yeah, in doing the research on political thinking, it led me to the four being a way to explain what I wanted. And then as I looked into it, it really started to reveal this whole pattern unto itself. I mean, the expression four directions, the four corners, everyone kind of intuitively or linguistically grasps that there is something about four.
Yeah, like the
And
four-leaf clover.
the four-leaf clover, exactly. And that's a really dope one because that illustrates this phenomena that I found in the celebration. We look for uh, what do they call it? Not they don't call it the three-leaf clover. They call it something else. But there's the most common is the three-leaf, right? And we look for the one that's special in the fourth, right? And so often enough, when there's a presented trinity, we'll find that there is actually an unsaid, silent aspect that's this fourth that really
Yeah.
is kind of where the darkness is, but also where the potential is as well. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. There's also like the four fundamental forces of nature in
sure.
physics.
The four fundamental energies, and then there's the theorized fifth, right, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
plasma, which they think is out there and think is obtainable or understandable. But yeah, there's the four types of energies, and that those even that with the strong and weak nuclear forces, right? This has a polarity in it. Um, and also, of course, people might be familiar with the idea of polarity in general, but maybe more specifically from the Kybalion, which has the tenets of Thoth, and one of them being polarity. And polarity it's not the second tenet, it's the fourth tenet.
Mm.
And so polarity actually is, when it's just dual, it tends to be divisive and tends to often come forth in a either or communication or presentation of idea. And this is really limiting, of course, and often worse in a social or psyche kind of thought construct. Either or mentality kind of leads us to awful places generally. So with the duality of polarity. Oh, and to that point, the Greeks, we pretty much get our numerology from the Greeks and the Hebrews. And the Greeks probably wrote down whatever the Hebrews were thinking as well. So it's probably we just get it all from the Greeks, and they got it from the Egyptians, right? And they would spit when the doad or two came up, and they didn't like it because of this reason that I just put forth, that it's divisive, right? When there's only two portions, you end up in this either or stagnation.
Yeah.
They loved three because it had a balance to it. There was the one and the other side and the center point. And of course, to the four, they related four to being symbolic of completion, of godliness, and also, as it turns out, consciousness. So four kind of brings together in that respect a way to perceive the universal and the individual.
Wow.
There's not a lot of ways that are perfect to do that, but four provides a basis to do so often enough.
Yeah, it seems like a more wholesome number as opposed to like a three. Like you got the idea of the four pillars of the world,
Or
stuff like that. And so this is what your new book is about.
yeah, actually, a big element of my new book is um, differentiating and exploring the exoteric and the esoteric.
Mm.
So, for example, in the introduction, I explore or present this idea with the Bardo Toto, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And for those who aren't familiar, it's a book to be read for the dying, or people, of course, that might, experience that, and you have some knowledge of the time period between death and rebirth. And that's a quite esoteric subject in of itself. But
Yeah.
but the it's basically saying the plain mannerism is that. And yet when it's read backwards, chapter by chapter, it actually is an explanation and description of the time period from birth to death.
Wow.
Yeah, and Carl Jung pointed that out. And so that idea, we can use to find all sorts of esoteric lessons from the esoteric, and of course the exoteric as well.
So like
In other words,
playing things backwards or looking at them backwards.
not necessarily limited to looking at things backwards, but looking for that. That of course did so. Carl Jung pointed out that in that case, in putting that backwards, it's actually the story of life rather
Mm.
than the story of between death and rebirth. But often enough, it's just looking for the subtlety in these lessons. One thing I've explored a lot is the allegory of the cave, and this is a insidious allegory and story that is really related to the Bible. It's related to the movie The Matrix and 1984, and probably a whole series of other eloquent and so forth stories. Um, in the allegory of the cave, there are, of course, four characters, four archetypes. There is the chained and the unchained. And these are actually similar to the dumb, deaf, and blind, or the steered of that 85%, right? So the chained and the unchained are, well, either chained and having to be forced to watch these images on the cave wall, and the unchained are, they don't even need the chains anymore. They're so transfixed with the imagery that they're not going anywhere. And the third character in the allegory of the cave are those that are casting the fake images, the false images appearing real. That's my favorite anagram for fear. False images appearing, or false evidence appearing real. Excuse me. Um, because often enough we get caught up in fear, right? And initiation is getting over fear, right? We get caught up in fear of like embarrassment, or we might run cycles of conversations that we never had and maybe never will have, and we're afraid of things having to do with that. So
Yeah.
there's that no fear aspect again, in that anagram, excuse me. And the fourth archetype character in the allegory of the cave is the freed prisoner. And he gets out of the cave and he realizes that sunlight is real, and that shadows are similar to the images, and reflections in the water are similar to the images. And so in that story, the fourth aspect is the freed prisoner, and it is also the ascended person, right? Someone who's looking to get out of the mundane lies. Um, and so and a metaphysical or esoteric way to look at that is, how many caverns of consciousness can we exit? And
Yeah.
it might be infinite, but certainly there's many different ways to look at that and take an esoteric lesson from what is already full of esoteric lessons, but also pertinent to reality and exoteric existence as well. But we can find in that case not necessarily backwards, just looking for the subtle internalization. Like how does this apply to my internal development and my internal existence?
And you're saying this is a process to move out of fear?
Well, I think, the big thing about the allegory of the cave is facing our fears, actually, underlying, because what the freed prisoner does, and I think he's in part forced to do so, but he leaves the cave of what the pattern and realm of existence. That's all he's known, right? And then, even more courageous and overcoming fear, he returns to the cave and tries to tell those that are stuck in the predicament, hey, there's a whole better thing going on. And they all laugh at him. And the cave, excuse me, the actual story references his poor eyesight after returning from the sunlight into the cave, and they mock him for not being able to see.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like the cruel irony, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, what there's all kinds of lessons that we can get out of that, I think, too. And another one is speak your truth. Especially when you know more than you're telling the people that you're telling, even though they're gonna mock you for it, right?
Yeah.
That's holding it down, right? Being able to say what is up underneath
Absolutely.
embarrassment and mockery
Do you
is
think it's do you think it's better, or maybe not better, but do you think in certain situations it's more applicable to kind of say things in a parable rather than to just say what it is exactly? Because I've found throughout my journey as I was waking up and trying to express this to certain friends or family, some people could just handle the truth right for what it was, but other people kind of had to like give it to them slowly in parables. And in other cases, it wasn't words at all. It was just actions and energy. And I was hoping that they would pick up on that and understand, that what I was trying to convey to them, which was that, there's more to this life, and that, we're really in charge and we have more power than we have been led to believe. But what do you think? Should we just
It's a great question, man. And I bet from hearing you out and listening to your videos that a lot of people have told you, hey, that thing you told me a couple years ago, you were right. I
it
bet a
happens?
lot of people have told you that. So you know what? I think we are all generally running patterns, and everyone also is really holding on to their belief system, if you will, from their experiences and their information. So yeah, a lot of times it is through parables and even dialogues, right? Because a lot of those old writings were actually dialogues. They weren't writing a story like we do it today. It was actually a story about Eddie and Ethan talking, right?
Yeah.
And so sometimes I find, what is it? Just like, what's the term for the uh, this kind of format is where I ask really simple questions, maybe not in reference to what they are partial about, right? Because usually it's a partisan thing, or they have this partial idea that's keeping them leaning one way or another, right? So I often find that presenting things in questions where it's not necessarily having to do with where they are partisan, and then that can get them to see the parallels, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. I was a tutor years ago, and I would tutor high school students, and we were always trained to, of course, never give them the answer because you don't want to just give the kids the answer to their homework.
Right.
That doesn't do them any good. And so we were always
Yeah.
trained to just ask questions and lead them to the answer, and it worked all the time. They'd be like, "I don't get this" or whatever. And the funny thing is, like the kids did know it, they did get it,
Hmm.
but they just were
Hmm.
insecure about it. And so we would just kind of ask the right questions, and then they would solve it on their own. I didn't have to do anything. I just asked them like, "Well, what do you think about this and that?" And they would get it.
That's dope. And the ancient Greeks actually believed, or some of them argued rather, that we don't learn things, we remember things, right?
Wow, yeah.
So like this, the dialogues um, uh, tend to instigate that memory. Even like you said, they kind of I could tell they already knew it.
Yeah.
So like there, it's sometimes we just need an instigation. And I to that point, I think we all might need a guru only to stop us from doing the wrong thing, right?
Yeah.
Like if we just have someone around occasionally saying some instigating the right thing, we'll tend to do that. Sometimes we need a guru to be like, stop that.
See
So
that old man with the cane stick to just whip us in the head.
exactly, exactly.
So man, so you said a lot of this started back in 9/11. If you don't mind me asking, what era of your life was that? How old were you back then?
Well, I was like just 27 about. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I was
Wow.
27. So and I was snowboarding in Tahoe, and I had a very simple life. But where I grew up in New York City in was Uptown Manhattan in Inwood. Shout out to Inwood. Um, and we actually had the most number of people from any neighborhood or city, that passed away that day.
Whoa.
One of my childhood's friends was on the 72nd floor and got after the plane hit, got stuck. So after one of the planes hit, I think the first one anyway. So a lot of people from Inwood had pretty white collar jobs down in those buildings, and
Yeah.
so and then you start seeing all the conspiracies and of all kinds of directions and angles, so it definitely got me like looking at like, wow, like I can't and it was the second time that they attacked that building, so it just yeah, it just got me interested in looking at the institutionalization of the world. In the
Mm.
United States we have it too, and other places have it even more harsh. And something that's been on my mind recently is that really the only way that we can, like as you were saying before, you want to guide some people to like, hey, like step up this next plateau, like this is a better view here, there's other things to look at. um, and I don't think people really have that opportunity in extreme collectivism, right?
Yeah.
In liberty, we have this freedom of choice, and then eventually, if we make it, we might have that choice to pursue individuation. Where I don't think in restrictive societies, it's you even get to that place where you might make that choice.
Yeah, I always say, I've been asked a few times, like how do we help people break out of the matrix, or how do we break out of the matrix? And I say it always starts with a moment of clarity. And it's a moment that most people in this life don't actually get, that moment of actually being able to rest and look around and analyze everything for yourself critically
Right.
is very important, because you can't move forward without having that first moment of seeing things clearly for the first time, as you might have when 9/11 happened.
And to that too, and something like 9/11 will do that too. Will do that. Um, and ultimately, the power in that is internalized by when we stop lying to ourselves, right? Like, just go. I'm not going to even say like, what do I think determined 9/11? What happened? I question it. I question it. Just doing that really leads to looking for the truth, right? And to not question it would be like, well, not there's certainly nothing to going on, so I just believe. And okay, well, you believe everything you're telling yourself too? Because I noticed you'd be lying to yourself.
Mm.
Kids do it more so than anything, right? But there's a Tai Chi expression. We do not rise to the level of our expectations. We sink to the level of our practice. And so, like,
Wow.
not having overcoming fear and essentially to stop lying, but just having this moment of clarity where we go, you know what? Ethan can't lift as much as I thought I could, or something. It could be simple moments of clarity, like just realizing your limitations, because then
Yeah.
you can expand. But if we just say, "Oh, I know I can do that," without ever doing it, then we're like riding our expectations.
Mm. Yeah, I like that, man. I'm a tradesman, so every day I'm learning something new, or every day I'm, literally bumping my head, and I have to
Mm,
come to those realizations that, sometimes my body is the crude governor of my life, and I have to take care of it,
yeah.
and
And there's
yeah,
only so much we can accomplish in a day, right? And
absolutely.
as a tradesman, your performance and ability and experience now compared to last year, totally different. You can do things now that you couldn't do before, because you said, someone said, "Hey, can you do this?" And you're like, "No, I can't." "Oh, I'll show you." No, you can't, right? Because if one, not you, if one were to say, "Oh yeah, I can do that," and then but you really can't, right? Then that kind of, so the truth will really set you free in that sense, where you say, "Yeah, I need help with this,"
Oh yeah.
whatever, any number of things. The overcoming fear and the ceasing lying is in itself a potential huge initiation of a lifetime. uh, you know,
Yeah, I love that, man. Like you can't, I mean, we can lie to ourselves, but eventually that catches up and it manifests and surfaces in ugly ways. And
mm,
I just came back from a 2-week vacation in Texas, and I went over there for a spiritual retreat that I was invited to. Really lovely time, and I did a lot of things that I'd never done in my life that were very vulnerable and just
beautiful,
opening, man. Like a lot of heart opening workshops and things, and
beautiful.
it was cool to like to be vulnerable and share these communal experiences, because as you say, when you stop lying to yourself and you look at yourself in the mirror and you look at yourself through the eyes of other people when you're
Mhm.
going through these experiences together, it's like just beautiful things happen, man. When you realize there's no reason to lie to yourself, there's no reason to be fearful of what others might think, because we're all just waiting for each other to open up so that we can open up.
Yeah,
The sooner we open up, then the person next to us can open up, and
that's
so we're
so
all just
true.
waiting for each other to open up so we can just love harder and live happier.
Yeah, beautiful. and
Yeah, man.
and
So, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, I mean, the heart is considered the center point of many different cultures. And just, once we, like a lot of people look at chakras and as energy systems that they want to have, but like sometimes chakras can represent blockages. And when we open up, all of a sudden, all these new things can come about.
Yeah, man. Do you do anything, any like spiritual practices in your day-to-day life?
Oh yeah, I do the 5 Tibetan rites every morning, and I practice Tai Chi daily.
What are those five Tibetan rites?
Oh, I highly recommend the 5 Tibetan rites. They're a powerful series of 5 movements from Tibet or Nepal, probably even Bhutan, and they're basically yoga postures repeated in
Mm.
opening and closings. And there's a lot of information on. I'll send you some
Yeah,
more,
man, please.
but they're super simple and very vigorous. I'm kind of a, uh, clumsy dun-dun. So like, I really appreciate the intensity of them, which I think a lot of masculine people do. And so they're really just a great kickstart to the day.
Mm.
And I practice and teach Tai Chi. So that's even more beneficial, but difficult to, as meditation is difficult, Tai Chi is kind of difficult like that.
Did you do psychedelics before you started looking into all this stuff?
I grew up in northern Manhattan in the 80s. So yes, yes.
Okay.
In New York in 87, for instance, I could find whatever I wanted from Strawberry Fields up to Dykeman.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I asked because I mean, to go through this awakening after 9/11, but to have done psychedelics before, you must have already kind of known that there was way more to this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I experienced mescaline was the first psychedelic I've experienced, and I've never really found that since. But I'm not big on this necessarily, but it did have some instigations of consciousness, certainly. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think, you start to perceive reality differently when, you're because a lot of times we're stuck in patterns, right? As I kind of mentioned before, if we have a good pattern, that might be okay to be stuck in. But if we're in a pattern of one of those either or paths, either or dynamic where you're partial to choices already before you're really observing the situation, that's holding on to a sight without really seeing reality. So I think many different things could have this instigation, but psychedelics certainly have that instigation where, um, Socrates said, "I know that I know nothing, and that's why I know a little bit more than this guy." He thinks he knows, right? When you have that either or mentality and you think you have the right and the or are wrong, what have you, you get into a trap. Um, one of the one of the dynamics of the four that actually, in its very basic pattern, is a kind of pattern breaker. Tai Chi is like that too. And maybe the Tao itself is like that, which the Tao is based on four as well. And so Tai Chi is a pattern that's the same form, but it's always different and it's always revealing new concepts and helping in new ways. The one of the foundational philosophies of the world actually is based on four, and it's Katskoti. Excuse my killing of the pronunciation, but it has to do with the Om symbol, and
Mm.
the Om symbol is based on four parts, and these four parts illustrate consciousness. And the Katskoti or Tetra something or other, often referred to as Tetra schism, something I forget exactly the terminology, but it'll make sense as I explain it mathematically. So that was a big philosophy in India for quite a long time and directly parallels Ohm. And it's A or B, and there's the either or. And actually, in the United States, we're played out all the time with A or B, Democrats and Republicans, either
Yeah.
or. And then they come up with a synthesis that is the AB, mathematically illustrated as AB, a combination. And then there in the fourth aspect in this uh, schema is the X. And the X, I call it nullisis, right? And it represents basically instead of the Democrats and the Republicans coming up with a synthesis, you come up with a nullisis that's outside of the box, that's not limited to the AB or A or B, right? And so that is one of the oldest kind of philosophical systems from India, and I don't want to say it fell off the wayside, but its consideration holistically fell off the wayside. And now more people might look at the metaphysical having to do with Om, which in its most simplistic symbological representation of Om is the wake state and sleep state and the deep awakening and deep dreaming. And so the fourth level of consciousness depicted in Om is kind of this higher level Buddha or Bodhihood or Christ consciousness type of thing.
Interesting, man. Yeah. So I never really thought about the four in that deep way, but now that I think about it, yeah, it's pretty much everywhere, you
It
know?
can be, it is everywhere at a basis, and it doesn't have to be the only thing that we conceptualize, but it's a great way to start to look at situational occurrences or social interactions and the esoteric as well. In that A or B or AB or X reference.
Have you
And
found this to be anywhere in Tai Chi?
oh yeah, well the Tai Chi actually what we call the yin yang symbol is actually in Mandarin the Taiji or
Mm.
Tai Chi too, Tai Chi too. But the Tai Chi is sufficient. And so Tai Chi Chuan and Chi is an energy. Tai Chi with the Tai Chi, it's often spelled that way, but it's a different word in its origination. It's Tai Chi, which means what we call the yin yang symbol, but it actually directly translates to grand ultimate.
Wow.
Yeah. And so the Tao represents that symbol, that what we call the yin yang. And actually in that name is kind of a subtle linguistical trick because it's actually not the yin yang symbol. It's not made up of two parts. It's made up of four, right?
Oh,
It's made up of
yeah.
it's made up of two main parts, and they call these major yin and major yang. And in the swirls that are the major portions, there are dots, and these are minor yin and minor yang. So Tai Chi, the practice, Tai Chi Chuan, the practice, is based on that symbol. In fact, it's the grand ultimate long form or grand ultimate long fist is Tai Chi Chuan.
Wow, man.
And Chi, most literally, here is a helpful linguistical concept and I find a lot of times when I come in understanding the East and West, there blossoms a better understanding linguistically and otherwise. But Chi actually, not Tai Chi, the grand ultimate polarity, but the energy Chi, at its most basic translation, it means compressed air. So when there are other forms of energy, but we are a biological greasy machine, and we have a magnetic component, an electrical component, and compressed air functioning like an air compressor X, Y, and Z, right? We don't really
Yeah.
do much without compressed air. Oh, but wait, it's plugged in. Yeah, you need the air though, right? And so chi means compressed air. And if you see someone who's depressed, right, their chi is not in balance or high. So their uh, emotional, mental, and physical depiction is one of depressed chi. And so when we, there's a lot of psychological tricks with Tai Chi. We actually trick ourselves into thinking in a better pattern by we might imagine fighting a bear or our worst enemy or our least favorite politician, and this kind of develops a feeling of strength, and then also what comes next, sympathy. I don't really dislike that guy that much. I don't want to fight him. He's poor schmuck. And so yeah, Tai Chi has all these pattern changing ideas, often in a psychological trick pattern. And we are so easily tricked that I can discuss how I trick myself and get other people to learn how to trick themselves, and they can hear it and actively do it still.
What?
So in the sense, what I mean there is that we can change our emotive and mental capacity through our physical easier than we can change our emotive and mental structure, emotionally or mentally, right? So actually get physical postures can influence our mental and emotional well-being quicker than any other route, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. I just finished writing my third book as well, on consciousness and the simulation theory. And that's one of the things that I got into was towards the end was like Kundalini and yoga and how this stuff is, it's not just about like this spiritual philosophy, but it's actually an ancient ancient techniques that show us how we can utilize the body, as you said,
So
in certain postures to activate the internal processes. For example, we have like the cerebral spinal fluid, so I'm sure you know about, that runs from the brain to basically the sacrum or the end of the spine, and that fluid can be activated through some of the yoga poses, and that fluid is very important in discarding viruses and bacteria and also disseminating information to the rest of the body. So a lot of this yoga stuff and other these other ancient techniques are not just about moving spiritual philosophies around, but they're actually physical, practical things that can help
yeah,
activate the body.
so that's so great that you did that and included that, and that you bring that up, because we like, I think we get caught up, I think maybe politically and linguistically, to think that when we're not well we need someone else to help us. Often enough, we need to change our pattern and start helping ourselves. And these systems are not necessarily there are layers of metaphysical aspects to them, but in a sense, they're very chemical, right? You go through these ideas that, or these postures that don't require an idea, and the chemical result happens. For instance, for you and everyone, when if folks can see, if I can scoot out of my position, raise my hands, we won, right? Everyone does this all across the world. We did it. Our team did it, and that is a way to physically change the mental and emotional attitude quicker than you can mentally with an idea or with some kind of other pattern shift. If I stand like this for 2 minutes, it's automatic. The chemical system will not be stopped by your negativity, right? Even if we're in a bad place and we're gonna do it, but it's not gonna work. The posture overrides all that. The body is saying, "We, you won, yeah, I." And if you add some consciousness to it, like I beat the bear again, I got the bear. Ethan, we need to exponentiate all his synovial fluid X now, right away. So and all these different postures have different effects on different parts of the system, but just like vibrations, like we're looking for different tones, it's almost more important to just get a vibration, just any tone, right? Just get any movement going, rather than looking for the perfect tone.
Yeah, I love that, man. I haven't learned that. We won one, but I really
That's
like
it's a
that.
good one. It is a good one, and it totally overrides like what are you saying? How can I trick myself? It completely overrides it. And with depression too, which came first, the posture of depressed or the thinking of depressed? Well, it's hard to say, right?
Wow.
But you know when someone is in a different sad posture, if you will, you know right away, especially if you know them. But even if you don't know them, you probably see it.
Yeah,
And so,
that's a very interesting way to put it too. Like what comes first is the mind that causes the body to slump, or is it being cramped in a workspace that's forcing you to slump all the time that then
right.
causes the mind to go there?
Yeah.
But yeah, real quick, when I was at that spiritual retreat recently, one of the workshops was having to do with inducing, as you were saying, happiness. And we all had to fake laugh, just, the facilitator was
Yeah.
like, just
And
laugh, just laugh really loud. And it was awkward at first,
then,
but there came a point where I started actually laughing. Like it was
right.
just
Yeah.
so
Right.
hilarious. I
Because
couldn't
someone
stop.
else is like has a silly laugh at first, right? You kind
Yeah.
of like you're laughing really funny. I'm laughing at your laugh. And now
Yeah.
everyone's kind of really laughing because we're all really laughing. And that there's another example, a great example of automatic chemical change, right? It just is going to happen, even if you're at first with the group. It's like the laughter technique is awesome because it just starts bouncing off of each other.
Yeah, man, the body and the mind, it's a spirit machine, as I call it in my book. And as you
Beautiful.
pointed out, there's a lot of cool and interesting things that we can do with it. Like I had a breath work, I did a breath work workshop at this retreat, and it was just intense. And it's crazy how we can experience all these different psychedelic and altered states of consciousness without drugs, without anything, just by
Right.
laying there and breathing intensively in a certain way for like a few minutes.
And back to my obsession, every breath is made up of four parts. And it's just like the yin yang symbol, actually, in a sense, how these kind of dynamics flow and then start to minimalize and then expand. And so often enough, we don't look at the pauses enough. And so one meditation technique would just be or breathing technique and meditation technique, just to be in the pauses a little bit longer. And so even if we're not concentrating on pausing, there is the inhalation, the pause full, the exhalation, and the pause empty. And so all breath has that kind of mannerism.
Wow. So would you say that this idea of the four has been known? It was just always there. We just kind of never really knew it, or what's the
Well, I
story
think
behind the four?
the Trinity is a very powerful concept in and of itself. And often enough, there is the Trinity plus one. And it usually the plus one rather is usually as demonstrated in the allegory of the cave. Let's not talk about that one. That guy that gets out and causes all the trouble. Let's not talk about him. And so often enough, it's this righteous rebel archetype that really doesn't suit the institutional teachers. And so the fourth aspect also is really internal. And so I think as the Trinity or a Trinity might have been overtly taught, the fourth was subtly taught, and maybe it was so subtle that it kind of got lost. Or with the righteous rebel idea, they just didn't want to have that demonstrated because it was so antithetical to the institutionalization that a lot of systems have happened. So it has always been kind of the unsaid aspect in and of itself. But and because of that, I think it got little considered and even maybe sometimes forgotten, not looked at.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting, man. Definitely. And what is your book called?
The fourth initiation is the new one. And another demonstration of this idea where the righteous rebel got eliminated, the fourth part that represents the righteous rebel, is from the wise monkey's adage. And this is one of the oldest um, visual depictions that comes with a of expressed group of words. There's the three wise monkeys is most commonly known. The fear no evil, excuse me, see no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil are the three most common. And fear no evil is the fourth, or do no evil. There, he's kind of both those. And he holds his center point, his dantian in the Eastern arts. Your dantian is where all movement originates. And so by holding his center point just below the belly button, he is unmoved. And he's looking, he's listening, and he's speaking. And in Mandarin and Japanese and a few other Asian languages, four is a homonym with death. For death is the ultimate completion. um, and it is also the biggest fear and the greatest unknown. And so it corresponds with that X of nullicis, this we're doing something different. And so four actually is like 13 in the West. In several buildings, we won't have the 13th floor. Older buildings might not. And one and three, of course, there's your four again with the 13. um,
Yeah, I was just about to say that.
yeah, the four is kind of disregarded often enough because the Trinity is so valuable too. But the Trinity can be valuable with this unsaid aspect as well. The four is kind of like the completion on into the next inspiration and pursuit.
Yeah, that's epic. The whole I didn't know there was a fourth one to the whole see no evil monkey
Yeah,
thing.
that's a change, a game changer. It really is. That adage I find is one that can help in a contextual symbolic manner kind of find the parallels with, oh, he's thinking like he's kind of, the politicians are real elitists, right? They always are keeping secrets, and they're kind of like communicating among their group certain thing, maybe different thing with that group. So like they're the classic elitists. So it's a good way to perceive people's character, I find. But to that, we all have phases where we're kind of illustrating these different archetypal patterns, right? Um,
Yeah. Would you say is was there any way to like implement the way of the four? Have you come up with a sort of curriculum or philosophy to like implement this idea of the four?
well, In one way, because there's so many different aspects of it, I feel like the essence of it kind of gets lost, right? Where people are familiar with different branches of the four philosophy, if you will, or as I call it, due to the Tetragrammaton, which is the name for God in the Bibles. I call it the four grammar because of Tetragrammaton. And the Tetragrammaton, if you boil down that definition of what exactly it means, it actually means four grammar, for grammation, right? So the grams and the grammar and that grammaton, that's where language and number kind of come together. And measuring reality, right? That's what number and language are helping us do. Um, there's so many different ways I've found to utilize it. Um, all of mathematics is based on the four operations of arithmetic. And what do we use mathematics for? I don't even know, like everything, right?
Everything. Yeah.
And so often enough, I find that you can look, well, actually, the four forms of arithmetic are really depictive of this duality of polarity. But division is kind of like different. So the addition and subtraction would be one polarity, and multiplication and division the second polarity. But division kind of has this strange quality to it, in that zero divided by zero is a mathematical unknown. Even though, like to me, it's probably zero. It's got to be zero, right?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but in mathematics, it could be 1,000. It could be infinity. And so therein is your nullisis, or this unsaid, unknown aspect with division. Um, there's so many ways to what I do generally is look at that pattern of arithmetic, for example, and then try to find different ways to express that esoterically or metaphysically, even though it's just arithmetic, right? But you can find different ways to orient those lessons, just like mathematics is used for science and sailing. You know.
Yeah, it almost seems like the four is like a master like number or like an elevated dimension. And it's interesting how I guess in the matrix, like the four represents the square, and the square is like it's deemed as like bad or whatever, like to the conspiratorial aspect because you got the cube with the dark cube
Mhm.
or the black cube of Saturn, and then cubicles and stuff like that. But it's almost like the square or the cube is it's neither good or bad. It's just a very masterful number, a very masterful geometry, as you're saying, that adds even more depth to the more playful three.
Yeah, and to geometry, there's also the four dimensions of geometry. And I actually one of my most popular book is The Geometry of Energy: How to Meditate. And one lesson I bring out of this four dimensions of geometry is the correspondence of meditations. A broad number of different meditations I explore and present in that book that all have this quality of points, lines, circles, cycles, planes, and solids or volume. Um, and most all meditation begins with a point of concentration, literally. Often enough, it won't be explicated that way, but it is, if in fundamental, even focusing on the breath, right? We're starting with a point, and the next phase of geometry is the line, which is symbolic of connection, right? And in Tai Chi, some Tai Chi meditations, Qigong meditations, will talk about imagining that we have a line of energy coming out of our crown, and we connect with our star or the North Star. And that, can be metaphysical, but also, get your head up, right? Like whether we're digging with tools or beetle bopping on our phones all day, we tend to like kind of sink down like that. So we get ourselves upright, we connect with the North Star, with the linear energy, and also connect with the earth from our tailbone with these lines of energy. And then we start circulating the energy. And the cycle of things, the repetition of meditation is kind of where the reward is. Just like medicine doesn't work if you do it once or take it all at once or whatever, right? It's kind of in culturally we don't like to look at the word ritual because we orient it with religion, and we don't like the institutionalization of that with good reason. But a ritual is just a repetition, right? And in Tai Chi, it's your form practice. If it's a meditation, it's your whatever, you do different ones. But whatever the concept is, the repetition really gets the juice. And that really brings the point of concentration, the line of connection, the plane of circulation, and the fourth aspect is unity consciousness, right? This connection with entirety. And sometimes this comes about in, when we're in a good mind state or we've been practicing our self-development. Tai Chi has this especially where my perimeter awareness is increased. And I'm thinking of Mark, and he is looking at me right now, but he's all the way over there or whatever, right? And your perimeter awareness kind of expands because maybe you have a better connection with your surroundings and yourself. And so the four dimensions of geometry is a powerful way to use this four lesson. But even the arithmetic one, there's several things that I bet people are, as they listen to this, sparking different ways to have this pattern of no pattern, right? And I've been hanging out with, this is my reflection on things, because I personally have been hanging out with elder with dementia, and he resorts to his pattern. His pattern is wonderful, but even when we lose our memory, we will resort to our pattern. And so I find via not my silliness, but via these old understandings, for instance, the A or B or AB or X is an efficient pattern to not get stressed. Because
Okay.
you're always like Tai Chi is about um, not necessarily doing a move, but responding to the move that the opponent does, right? And so sometimes your response you might want it to be A pretty consistently, but other times it needs to be AB, or what have you. So when we get stuck in a negative pattern, we'll be carrying it forth, even when our memory is not there. And even when we don't have dementia, we are operating in patterns, which is another initiation process. Face that, right? There's a group in one to that point. There's a philosophical group in the Chinese warring states period where all these different philosophical groups were competing and fighting, or rather, had a king that was fighting among other kings, or not kings, but type of thing. And one of these philosophies was called Moism, and one of the main aspects of that was the pursuit of impartiality. And that is again an initiatory self-development process that you can work on for many years, to be impartial and not uncaring, but to be impartial to idea and to things, to where you see them more clearly. Not you don't see them at all, You just are not seeing it through the red or blue sunglasses, if you will.
Yeah, I love that perspective. That's kind of where I try to be in life and with my work is just in that center neutral ground, seeing everything
I
from
see that.
360 as opposed to up against a wall, just looking straight ahead. But going back to what you were just saying about, defaulting to our memory when we have dementia, but also like on a spiritual level, with like samsara and stuff like that, it's like our habits and our cycles cause us to come back, as
Right,
according to the
right.
philosophy. So in order to stop that, we need to break through that fourth wall, that proverbial fourth wall, and elevate so that we don't keep faulting back or defaulting back to our habits and stuff like that. And it's interesting too because in order to elevate past that, we need to get to such a conscious awareness that it expands to the point where we can remember who we are outside of this
Mm,
death cycle, this current incarnation. And if we don't expand to that point where we can actually remember, then it will just keep coming back. It's
right.
like how can you transcend this realm if you don't even know what it is on the other side? In order to expand to the point where we actually know what's on the other side and actually how to get over there, then we can actually break through. But we are led to default to our habits, to our vices, to our cyclical things here in this corporatocratic world that keep us trapped in that samsara. At
Yeah.
least that's just kind of what I
That was
ran through my
beautiful,
mind
man.
when you said
Yeah,
that.
that's great. That's a great build. And we can't learn or think about the metaphysical if we're always stuck in the physical, even if it's in what is a good manner, right? Like the Buddhists talk about the monkey mind. And this illustrates the idea where we're on a vine, and then before we get off that vine, we're on another one, and then another one, and we're kind of, oh, here's a vine, and we're not going anywhere with any direction. We're just grasping and seizing is a term that they will often use. And actually, babies like again, babies just like that's one of the first things we can do as a person is grasp and seize. And with ideas, we're often doing that, and actions. We're often on from one vine to another without really thinking about, hey, wait a second, where am I? Am I still running away from the tiger? Where am I going? What am I doing? And this is a getting caught up in the samsaric materialistic thing of one idea or even one cool new car and then another thing, right? Because humans, a lot, often enough, when we're basic functioning, we're on one thing, and as soon as we get it, well, I kind of want that other thing now. And we kind of move like that. So another play on words and another thing that people do is the money mind, right? Where everything they do it's presented as a totally logical, thoughtful process, but it's actually kind of portraying or playing out the monkey mind pursuits, right? And so they have a said explicit direction, but it's all samsaric. It's all based on obtaining things, and actually everything that they're relating to you might be fundamentally measured in a time money reference, and they're not even putting a metaphysical value or esoteric or spiritual value onto anything that they're doing, let alone outside of their pursuits. So the monkey mind is not explaining things and is lost, and the money mind, they can explain things perfectly, but it's just as samsaric related, and we can only think of so much, and when we're conceptualizing these materialistic things, there's no room for anything else.
Wow, yeah, man, that's interesting. It's just an illusion. This world makes you think that just because you're getting up every day and going to work and making that money, like that you're productive, that you're doing something, but really you're just acting out the monkey mind in the monkey world. You're just
Yeah,
living the monkey life
yeah.
at that point.
We are quite extraordinary, complicated monkeys in that in that respect. If we don't pursue development, I think we do get caught up in the mundanity that could be accurately compared to some basic existence like that, right? But as soon as there's an instigation, then there's this, you know, the religiosity will have us pursuing God or maybe understanding God, but usually pursuing worshiping God and being obedient to God, where really I think it's pursuing being godly, pursuing being aligned with the Tao or aligned and close to the Tetragrammaton. We can't be God, of course, everyone knows that, but we can be have qualities of godliness. We can have a better modality than just samsaric.
Yeah, man, 100% agree with that. Well, brother Ethan, man, it's been fascinating, dude. Like this, I've
Thank you
learned a
so
lot.
much, man. That was fun. Appreciate it.
Is there any, are there any closing thoughts, anything that you want to say to the people? Any words
Uh,
of encouragement?
well, um, just keep pushing. Inspiration is in spirit, right? It is inside, and it is maybe even respiratory, but your inspiration is within you, and you shouldn't be dependent on groups, nor make yourself dependent on external circumstances to how we feel, right? So the inspiration to better ourselves and to change the way we feel is in you. It's right there. Um,
Absolutely, man.
yeah, and I'm on all the usual social media. I'm out there,
Yeah,
so
yeah. Go ahead, plug it in. Where can the people find you?
I mean, Facebook, Twitter. I'm on all the usual, YouTube. And I always appreciate correspondence. And my books are on Amazon, of course.
What should we type in? How do
Oh,
they find
Ethan Indigo Smith. I don't. There's no fakes, no fake Ethan Indigo Smiths yet.
you? Ethan Indigo Smith.
Yeah, yeah.
Ethan. Cool, man. Well, there you
Ethan
have it,
Indigo is
everybody.
works too.
Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you again, homie Ethan.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
with that being said, peace.
Peace on earth.